they have big, big plans for what's coming next, for what they have planned for our lives. All right. Secret government programs and secret government plans have been leaking, and it shows that we are entering the next phase. All right. They are preparing for something huge, and we need to get ready too. We need to see what they're preparing for, and we need to get prepared for the same thing, but before they implement the plan. All right, because it's not gonna be good for your life, for your business, for your bottom line. All right, it's going to make things a lot worse, and we need to get ready. So, just starting off, the things we're going to cover today: critical food shortages are also happening in the United States of America. All right, oil refineries are burning around the United States of America too, as we have this diesel emergency. I made a whole video yesterday breaking down all the different things going on with the energy economy and how there is a diesel emergency being declared in multiple states. But now even oil refineries are catching on fire. Massive oil refineries that produce hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day are catching on fire. Big things. More historic layoffs. All right. The EU gives a grave warning to its citizens, and people are protesting all over Europe. All over. It started off in Paris, France, but now it's spreading. Multiple countries all over Europe are experiencing these inflation protests. People are freaking out. And also, an emergency government program has been leaked of what's coming next in just the next few months. All right, so we need to get ready. So just to start off, guys, and just stick with me, we'll get to all these topics. All right, they're all important, they're all connected. All right, so homeless shelter in Iowa faces critical food shortages, now has to purchase its own food. All right, this is in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It says food is disappearing off the pantry shelves at the Micah House. All right, this is a food organization. If you live in the area, maybe you can donate food to this food pantry. They desperately need it. And donations aren't coming in fast enough to fill them back up. This is in Council Bluffs, Iowa, if you live in the area. It says, in the last 6 months, this has steadily increased as we have less options to work with. Anderson said. Jenny Anderson works with marketing and community development at Micah House. She says in the past they've never really had to spend money on food, but they are receiving fewer food donations than any other year in history, and they think the economy is to blame. All right. So big things are happening. Even the food shelters for the most vulnerable people don't have enough food. All right. We are in big trouble. It says we are experiencing a lot of price inflation and people are not aware of it. It says Micah House now spends between $700 to $1,000 every week just to purchase meat and other canned goods. And they normally would spend $300 a month. So they're now spending $3,000 a month, and they normally spend $300 a month because donations have been cut back. They're saying, for a 10-pound hamburger roll, it's $35 for them, right? So things are adding up quick. Even the food shelters are struggling. All right, so I just wanted to bring this up first because if you live in this area, go donate to this. All right, it's called Micah House, MICAH House. Right, it's a food pantry, a shelter. I think it's a women's shelter too. Like homeless women, stuff like that can go there that have children, things like that, and they help them out. So check it out. You can go donate to that if you live in the area. All right, they definitely need it. So, and this also comes as there's multiple oil refineries. All right, so oil refineries all over the United States are catching on fire. Okay, and this one was a Chevron oil refinery, another one. So the night of the midterm election, another oil refinery This one, owned by Chevron and located at El Segundo, California, caught fire under mysterious circumstances. Firefighters were called to the scene, which was described as a, quote, massive fire. Officials say they have no idea how the fire started. Next day, Reuters reported that, quote, the isolated fires occurred inside Chevron's 269,000 barrel per day refinery, and it is now extinguished. 269,000 barrels per day. That's massive, all right? And I know we use millions of barrels per day, but this is a, even if it's 5-10% of the total consumption, that's a big amount to have potentially cut offline. We are very fortunate that this refinery did not go up in complete smoke, all right? We are very fortunate. It goes on to say that the BP Husky Toledo oil refinery in Ohio also caught on fire, right? This was last month, I believe. And it says it has, quote, safely been shut down after a fire reportedly broke out for no apparent reason. A BP spokesperson told Reuters that the company suspects leaking fumes from a crude unit may have caused the ignition in order for that to happen. All right, so they're saying leaking fumes. I mean, I'm sure there's fumes all over these refineries. It's probably something very common. Maybe that is what was the case. But that oil refinery, it says, processes 160,000 barrels per day. All right. And that was in Toledo, Ohio. So we are seeing this. I was talking yesterday about how a chemical plant caught on fire. All right. Why do all these things keep catching on fire that are critical to our infrastructure? If these two oil refineries did catch on fire and burnt to the ground completely, that would be close to 400,000, over 400,000, 450,000 barrels per day that would have been wiped out just from those two refineries alone, right? That's the kind of risk that we are facing right now. And I've never heard anything like this. Refineries that produce so much oil having fires, massive fires like this. So thankfully they were able to shut down the fires, but it's just another thing. We are on the edge. We're on the verge, and all it takes is a few more dominoes to fall for things to really accelerate, for it to really snowball, all right? Energy prices, gas prices, it's the backbone of the economy. It affects everything, and its price going up exponentially affects the price of everything else in the economy. All right, so stay tuned. Lots of big stuff still coming through, all right? So stay tuned with this, all right? So the EU warns of, quote, difficult months ahead as the Eurozone faces recession, all right? Quote, difficult months ahead. So we've already known that this is coming, but now they're just telling us, hey, this is how it is. Difficult months ahead. You are going to face I think we've been in a recession already, but I think we are going to face a depression now. I think that's what they actually want to say, is a depression, because they never admit it's bad until it's really bad. It's one of those things like, we're not in a recession. There's no inflation. There's no this. They never admit it's bad until they're forced to admit it's bad, because it's already so bad and we're already past the point of no return. So we're probably facing a depression. That's probably the wording that is actually appropriate for this. So it says the EU warned on Friday that the Eurozone was set to fall into recession this winter as Brussels hiked inflation forecasts for 2022 and 2023 on the back of high energy prices. See, these gas prices, all this stuff, it affects everything. Every little thing you touch got there from a truck, from a ship, from a cargo plane. It was driven there by something, and it was probably driven a long ways. And on top of that, if it's plastic or any kind of modern synthetic material, it's probably a fossil fuel derivative, a petroleum derivative. All the plastics, a lot of the clothing, all these weird synthetic materials that we have now to build all these cool things, a lot of them are derivatives of fossil fuels and petroleum. So all those things are also affected from the price as well. And my local gas station, right? I was driving by and the pumps were all out of gas. They all had yellow tape on it, right? All out of gas. Let me get this video up really quick so I can show you guys. But they were all of them. I was shocked. Because I just made this video. All right, I literally posted this video yesterday. Let me get this up for you guys so you can see it. All right, I posted the diesel video yesterday, and then I had to run into town. And then on my way home from town, this was the gas station, right? This was the gas station. All had yellow. You can see the other side has yellow too right there. See that yellow? All had out of service. See that? It's just looping for you. All out of service. They all had the yellow bags on it. You can see the other side had it too. All right. This is getting dangerous. This is getting real. We knew this would hit right after midterms. And these strategic oil reserves are for a massive war. This is for our military in case we go into a sudden war and all the oil reserves throughout the world, the oil markets are cut off. This is if we enter a massive war and Russia instantly cuts off all oil. Saudi Arabia cuts off all oil. Iran cuts it off. Everyone's like, no, this is our oil. That's what it's for. So we already have our own for the military to operate in an emergency situation. That's what these reserves are for. And now they're essentially empty. They still have not been replenished. And I don't understand. This is a national security risk. And we knew this was going to hit. But now we're seeing it, all right? And I haven't seen this gas station do this in a few months. In the summer, I saw a bunch of gas stations doing this with the yellow bags on it, out of service bags. But now it's happening again. It's happening again. All the pumps had no gas at my local gas station, all right? So it's happening. Let's get back into this EU warning. It says, Europe is reeling from the economic shockwaves unleashed by the war, which have fueled a spike in energy costs and hit the wallets of consumers around the continent. The EU's executive arm said increased uncertainty and prices are, quote, expected to tip the Eurozone and most of the bloc member states into recession in the last quarter of this year. Quote, the contraction of the economy, the economic activity is set to continue in the first quarter of 2023. Growth is expected to return to Europe in spring, the European Commission said. All right. So hopefully it returns in spring. That's what they're saying, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm worried this is going to be a very tough and drastic winter that we see, especially in the EU and in the US. And we'll get to these plans that have leaked, the secret program for what they're planning in just a few months for this winter. All right. So there's also been massive layoffs. All right. The biggest freight layoff in history, that's what they're calling this, just happened. Right. So one of the biggest freight providers in the US just laid off over 1,000 employees. Okay. And they're saying this is one of the biggest freight brokerage layoffs in history that's not related to a bankruptcy or acquisition. You know what I mean? It's not like they sold the company or they had to go into bankruptcy. They're just saying, we are over leveraged and we need to fire over 1,000 employees to stay afloat, right? So this is what he said. He said, quote, the CEO, quote, we got ahead of ourselves in terms of headcount, right? And it says they employ nearly 17,000 employees and are cutting over 1,000. He said he did not forecast truckload demand declining as rapidly as it did, as well as spot market and contract rates deflating considerably. So truckload demands have been down. There's been less demands to send goods because we are in a recession. People are buying less things. People are only buying consumables that they need in the moment, like gas, electricity, food. You know what I mean? They're buying consumables. These are the things that are keeping the supply chain going. But all the unnecessary items are being cut out of the budget, and this is affecting the supply chain. And we are seeing contractions in the freight market, right? So even the truckers, even the freight industry is experiencing layoffs as well, because I was reporting on the tech industry layoffs, like Facebook yesterday, laying off over 11,000 employees, right? So big things every single day. We're seeing a new company lay off massive amounts of their employees. Why is this happening? But I mean, apparently we're not even in a recession. Just like this European warning, we won't even be in a recession until this winter. That's what Europe is not in a recession. All right. If you live in Europe, the EU says you are not even in a recession yet. All right. And same thing in the US. They're saying we're not even in one yet too. And we're seeing massive layoffs. And just on top of all this, I just wanted to point this out because, I mean, it's kind of sad, but it seems like a lot of this is intentional. It seems like this is agenda driven. And I really hope not, but it kind of seems like it. And it doesn't seem like things are going to get better according to our leaders. So Biden even came out yesterday and he said, quote, he will do nothing differently, quote, nothing differently after the midterms because he is, quote, confident these policies are working and, quote, I'm not going to change. So he came out on Wednesday, projected confidence in the country's direction after the elections, responding, quote, nothing when asked what he will do differently in the next 2 years. And, quote, I'm not going to change. Quote, confident these policies are working. So, I mean, nothing's going to change, guys. We heard it right there. We are stuck in this scenario. We are stuck in this situation. This is the reset. This is the next phase of the entire globe, honestly. This is the next phase of implementing a global economy, a global system to track, trace global currency. We know these things are talked about openly at places like the WEF, World Economic Forum, at Davos Summit. All right, they openly, COP, they openly talk about these things, these agendas of implementing world systems, right? And nothing's going to change, quote, nothing's going to change. We are going to continue towards this path, all right? So just to let you know that it doesn't matter if the food bank can't afford food, is buying thousands of dollars of food a week just to, like, they're not getting any donations. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if there's thousands of people getting laid off. Doesn't matter about the recession or depression. And it doesn't matter about strikes that are happening in Europe as well that we're going to get into. Nothing's going to change, guys. Quote, nothing is going to change. That was just said yesterday, day before yesterday. All right. So let's get into these massive protests that are also happening inside of Europe, all over the EU, massive protests, massive strikes. And this is a foreshadowing of what's to come to America and what's to come to the world and what is coming next. It's going to get even worse. Just like I said, nothing's going to change. People are protesting en masse because of inflation, because of the recession, because of all this stuff going on. But nothing's going to change. All right, remember that. So here's the article. Protests and strikes erupt across Europe as soaring inflation and cost of living drives, quote, winter of discontent. Protests have erupted in Greece, Spain, France, Bulgaria, and other countries. This is spreading, all right? It started in Paris, France, and now it's spreading to a lot more countries. And it's coming to America, it's coming to Australia, it's coming to the UK, it's coming everywhere. It's coming to the Middle East, coming to Africa, coming to South America. It's coming all over Canada. It's going to hit all these countries, Russia, everywhere's China, everywhere's going to get hit by this. This is a global catastrophe and a global collapsing of the financial system. So workers in Greece and Belgium walked off the job this week as protests have unfolded all across Europe, pushing back against soaring cost of living prices driven by inflation and what some have labeled a, quote, winter of discontent. Workers in Greece held a 24-hour strike this week when thousands of protesters marched through Athens and the northern city of Thessaloniki, prompting brief clashes with small groups of protesters breaking off from the main group and throwing Molotov cocktails and rocks at police who responded with tear gas and stun grenades. This is in Greece, right? In Athens and other cities. So it says the strike disrupted services around the city with ferries tied up in port, severing connections to Greece's island. State-run schools shutting, public hospitals running with reduced staff, and most public transport grinding to a standstill. Okay? Are you prepared for things like this to happen? Are you ready for, this is what's happening in Europe, and things like this will spread. Are you ready in your country for things like this to be shut down, for services to be shut down, the transport to be shut down, hospitals, schools, ferries, all this stuff are shut down? Would you be prepared? Could you survive? What if these things were shut down for weeks, months, years? We've seen things been shut down for years before. We've seen this before, haven't we? It seems like a distant memory, but we've seen things shut down for months, even years, and we could see this again potentially soon, but maybe for different reasons. It says a similar scene unfolded in Belgium as traffic backups were reported across the country after workers set up picket lines at supermarkets and shopping centers to protest runaway inflation and energy bill spikes due in part to the war. That's what they're saying. That's what this article is saying. It says more than 100,000 government workers could be walking off the job this winter in the United Kingdom to protest the cost of living hikes, according to The Sun and Reuters. And they also said drivers working for the 12 British train operators announced they will strike on November 22nd. So we're seeing all these strikes, all these protests, and I know people do have real gripes with these strikes and everything, but I also do worry that labor unions there could be corruption involved, maybe in certain areas, certain unions, to make shortages, make the supply chain even more disrupted, even worse with these strikes. Just speculation, all right? But maybe, even if it's not coordinated, it's definitely going to make the supply chain and going to make operations of everyday life worse, having transportation sectors especially go on strike. And we've seen this in the U.S. too. They are still on the verge of a railroad strike in the U.S. They thought they had an agreement, but they all have to agree. I think it's like 12 or 13 different unions, and one or two of them have rejected the deal, and they are now trying to work this out in the U.S. So this is also a potential threat in the U.S. as well, right? Scotland's main teaching union said on Thursday that it had won an overwhelming mandate to strike along with a major rail union and postal worker union, right? Who is also threatening to strike this winter. So all these strikes, rail union, postal workers, teachers, like the agenda is always to shut it down. The agenda is always to shut down society, shut down our infrastructure, because they know if things are allowed to just operate how they're supposed to operate, then we'd probably be okay. We'd probably be fine. People would probably, slowly go up. The standard of living would probably slowly go up like it has throughout the world, right? The standard of living throughout the world, throughout the past 100 years, has incrementally gone up for almost everyone on Earth, all right? Almost everyone on Earth is living in at least a slightly better condition than they were 100 years ago, right? So we're working with one of these things, but they want to shut it down, all right? We're working with a society that could function, but they want to just skirt around that, shut everything down, right? And I understand the people's gripes. I get people are being treated badly in certain working conditions, treated unfairly. I get that too, right? But it also seems like a lot of these unions are corrupt, are part of this agenda to shut things down, right? Workers in Spain are also pushing back against the cost of living increases as truck drivers have called for an indefinite strike next Monday, right? Truckers in Spain, indefinite strike. This is all over Europe. We're not even done yet, but let me just reread the countries that we've talked about really quick. Spain, Scotland, and Belgium, Britain, Greece, right? This is happening all over Europe, all over. Thousands of Bulgarians took to the streets on Friday in a rally organized by the country's two largest labor unions to protest inflation and demand higher salaries this winter to compensate for the rising cost of living. It's one of these things, they need more money to live. Prices are going up, but then going on strike will probably make energy prices, all the other prices for things, go up even more. All right? So it's just one of these catch-22s. And truck drivers are threatening to strike indefinitely in Spain. This could pop up anywhere in the world. We saw these Canadian truck drivers, and look at what happened to them. They had their bank accounts seized. They were treated like severe criminals. And we could see this happen in Spain for sure. If this happened in Canada, we could see this happen in Europe as well. All right. And it's probably likely that this will happen. And it will set a precedent for people that maybe you shouldn't be a trucker protester. Maybe you shouldn't block the streets. Maybe we will shut you down and treat you like a criminal and take your bank account if you are a trucker protester. All right. I'm just saying, they put that message out there and it scares people, and people don't want to respond. But then what do? But then you just sit back and you're just getting starved out through inflation. And inflation's also a tax. When everything's inflated, you're paying more taxes on everything. Maybe you get paid more, but you pay more taxes. And everything costs more, you're paying more tax on that. Everything, it's also a tax, all right? So, and then it makes it easier for the government to pay back their debt with inflation. So it's kind of a win for the government in the short term, and it's a massive lose for us, all right? And all of this comes as inflation hit a new record in October in 19 countries that use the euro currency. Economic growth also slowed ahead of what economists fear is a looming recession, largely as a result of those higher prices sapping Europeans' ability to spend. So, inflation hit a new record in October in 19 countries that use the euro. Still hitting records. Everyone was celebrating here in the U.S. because inflation, I believe, went down 0.2% to like 7.7%. So it was 7.9 and it went down 7 to 7.7 or something. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I saw lots of people celebrating, and I was confused. I was like, inflation is still 7.7%. It only went down 0.2%. It's just this is the new normal. Remember that term? This is now the new normal. It's a conditioning. After 6 months of having 8, 9, 10% inflation, now you think 7.7, you're like, That's pretty good. 7.7. Wow. It's a conditioning. They always do this. They move the Overton window way over. They push it way far, and then they pull it back to the middle, and then you're like, oh, it's okay here. But then you were over here already. And then they pull it way over here, and then they come back here, and then you end up over here when you were over here before, right? Inflation was only 2% before. Now it's 7%, but you think 7% is normal now. What's going to be normal next? 15%? This is what happened in Venezuela. Argentina, this is happening right now. Argentina is facing 100% inflation right now. Their interest rates also with their IMF deal, they have an IMF deal, and this deal stipulates that their interest rates have to go up with their inflation rates. So their interest rates are around 100% right now. Can you imagine? Inflation's 100%. And then you're also facing interest rates that are 100%. And it's not even helping the inflation, and the inflation's still just going. It's crazy. That's kind of what we're heading towards. It's where it's stagflation. You have a recession and depression going on from the interest rates. There's no growth, but the inflation can't stop. The inflation keeps going because there's no growth and there's no production, and there's less and less things being produced, and more people are trying to buy less things being produced, and it just jacks up the price of everything more. All right. So one of these things, this is exactly what we are heading towards in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, in Australia. All the Western nations, even China and Russia, are also moving towards this as well. All right. They are experiencing their own economic collapse. India is having economic problems. All throughout the world, countries are having this because they've done a lot of sketchy things the past few years. All right. And now we have to pay the price. So, sorry about that. Let's get into these leaked documents, all right, because they are wargaming for massive emergencies to happen, all right? This is what they're preparing for, and you need to be prepared for this too, because the government is now leaking this document and saying, you need to prepare for this, like we're preparing for this, so what are you doing, all right? So this is happening in the UK. Ministers, quote, war game emergency plans to cope with week-long blackouts. All right. Whitehall documents warn food and water supplies, transport, and communications could be disrupted for 7 days in a national power outage amid fears of a winter energy shortage. All right. So I know that was a lot, but documents warn of food and water supply, transport, and communication disruptions for up to 7 days and probably longer. Remember, they always say it's like a week or two. They always say things like that. It'll only be a week or two. And they're just telling you it'll only be 7 days, but prepare for things to be disrupted for weeks. And then once these things are implemented, then we'll probably get like shipments in. Like things will start being, here's your, like, oh, it's been 2 weeks since we've had any supplies. Now we get supplies. And then everyone will take all these supplies right when they get in. And then it'll be 2 more weeks, a month, another month without getting any more supplies. And this is what we are heading towards in the biggest countries, biggest economies on earth. This is what they are planning for. And this is from Winter Energy Shortages. It says ministers have, quote, wargamed emergency plans to cope with week-long blackouts this winter. Government documents marked official sensitive warn that food and water supplies, transport, and communications could all be severely disrupted for up to 7 days in a, quote, reasonable worst-case scenario in the event of a national power outage. This is what the UK government is preparing for right now. You can bet the United States have a plan just like this. You can bet Australia. You can bet almost every country in Europe has a plan. You can bet Russia, China. You can bet every major country is working on this right now because they know what's coming next, all right? And it says, Whitehall officials are sorry about that. Whitehall officials are stress testing program Yarrow. This was a secret government program that they're leaking the documents for this. So program Yarrow, the secret plan to cope with blackouts, which includes prioritizing getting food, water, and shelter to the young and elderly, as well as those with caring responsibilities amid an energy crisis, right? So they're wargaming, having blackouts, having all the communications knocked out, transportations knocked out. I mean, it seems pretty extreme to have all these things knocked out just from like winter blackouts. They're probably preparing for something even bigger, like EMP attacks or something to do with this war, right? But they are preparing to get food to the elderly, to the young, and people that need to take care of other people as well, because they're going to be the most vulnerable. Do you want to be on this list to have the government be waiting around for the government to bring you food and water and shelter? That's what this program Yarrow is. And I'm thankful they're planning to help people, I guess. All right, they're preparing for this, but at the same time, they know what's coming. And they need to be telling people that they should be preparing themselves too. They should have their own preparedness. And there's a lot more to this too. But you should be getting prepared yourself. Do you want to be sitting around waiting for the government to bring you food and water while it's the middle of winter? There could be 2 feet of snow on the ground. There could be 6 feet of snow on the ground. Like, who knows where you live, right? Places like here can get up to 10 feet of snow in, like, certain time frames, all right? Very quick time frames, 48, 72 hours. You can get very high snowfalls, right? And things like that, you get trapped in your house for a while, right? What would you do? Are you prepared for this? Do you want to be sitting with no power and waiting for the government to bring you food or water? All right, you need to get your pantry stocked up. You need to get water filters. You need to get heating sources, energy sources, wood stoves, all this stuff. Good thing about snow, it is a water source. If you have a heat source, you could convert this into water if you need it in the winter. That's one of the only good things about it. But get prepared, guys. You do not want to be on this list. Let's dive into more of what it's saying. It says, the cross-government plan was first drawn up last year, even before this invasion, right? Even before all this stuff popped off, they said they were planning this. So all these things are so just coincidental. Like, we know there's an agenda. They're setting up they're preparing for a collapse scenario. It says, in a bid to improve planning and resilience in the event of a major fault on the national grid, The Guardian reported, it is understood that the type of technical fault envisioned under the plan includes an attack by a hostile foreign power on underwater power cables following attacks against the Nord Stream energy pipelines in the Baltic Sea, right? As well as flood damage and thunderstorms, right? So they are also planning for an attack by a, quote, hostile foreign power on underwater power cables. We already saw this. We saw the fiber optic cables in the Shetland Islands. I brought it up again yesterday. I just wanted to remind everyone. The Shetland Islands, they were cut going from Scotland, UK, Scotland to the Shetland Islands. It's already happened in the UK and in France, all right? And they are saying the power cables could be cut too. The power cables could be cut. They are preparing for this. It's probably going to take longer than a week if these power cables are cut, all right? Probably take longer than a week to get them back on, to get them operating, and who knows how many places they could be cut. A nuclear device could even be detonated on these cables. Like, there's so many different scenarios to take out the power supply that we're not really sure what it would look like. It could be a lot more devastating than what they're even admitting. All right, so it comes as the Met Office warns of an increased chance of a colder than usual winter this year, which could put further pressure on gas and electricity supplies. All right, so they're even preparing for a colder than usual winter. Program Yarrow prepares for a situation more severe than outlined by the National Grid last month, which warned of 3-hour rolling blackouts. So this is even more severe that they're preparing for. The plan envisions that 60% of electricity demand will be met within day 2 and day 7, when households and businesses will be given intermittent access to ration supply, right? So you will get 60% energy capacity on day 2 and day 7 of the week. This is what it is saying. And given, quote, a intermittent access ration supply. Households and businesses will be given 24 hours notice of a planned outage. So 24 hours, we're going to cut your power off, right? And the plan could be published up to a week ahead on a rolling basis. It's crazy, guys. They're just preparing us for this collapse. They really want to bring things down. They really want to shut down our grid, our government, everything. They really just want to shut it down, right? It says the, quote, Rhoda disconnection plan is designed to cut power evenly across the country, according to documents seen by The Guardian. The power cuts should initially take place once a day for 3 hours, although it could take an hour to reconnect after that, though the frequency of cuts will depend on the severity of the crisis. And under program Yarrow's worst case scenario, only analog FM radios would work, with just BBC Radio 2 and 4 broadcasting. That's kind of scary. So, did you hear that? They could even cut off all the internet, all the communications as well. All right, this is very disturbing, very strange. All these, your phone, it's all signals. It's all radio signals. And they said in Program Yarrow, this is the program we're talking about, worst case scenario, only analog FM radios would work, with just BBC Radio 2 and 4 broadcasting. So only the British Broadcasting Network would be the only one that works, right? Only the official British networks. That would be the only thing that you could access to get communication. This is crazy stuff, guys. This is what they're preparing for. Shut down the grid, turn off your lights, ration your energy, and turn off the communications as well. So only they. And why would they be doing that? Because they're preparing for a massive, they said that, a foreign attack. And when that happens, they want to take over the communication devices of everything. You've heard of internet kill switches. These have been implemented over a decade ago in the United States. Decade plus ago, internet kill switches were put in. I believe under the Obama administration, they put in internet kill switches, right? For scenarios like this. So they're admitting this program Yarrow, this is part of it. A kill switch to only have BBC radio working, right? That's the only frequency that would work. So one Whitehall source told the paper, quote, we need to think about how it can help each other in advance. The fact they're talking about it now means they have real concern it could happen. So they're worried this is going to happen. And it's probably more than they're worried. It's probably a plan, right? It's probably things are being planned to happen behind the scenes. But things are so compartmentalized. There's probably people planning and there's probably people worried that are preparing. There's probably people planning and people preparing, right? And some people don't know. There's people planning. Some people, you know what I mean? It's all compartmentalized in government. Doesn't mean everybody's bad. But it seems like they're planning for something huge, right? And it says Britain has one of the most reliable power networks in the world. And unless cables are cut by storms or other accident outages are rare, right? So It says they have one of the most reliable power networks in the world, but apparently not, right? But this winter, gas generators might not be able to get enough gas to keep running. I'm telling you guys, there's massive diesel generators that are just running, that generate your electricity, and they're just dumping diesel into them. And that accounts for a massive percentage of our electricity grid. And people just don't account for it. People think it's unimportant. I'm not saying you do, but it seems like it doesn't matter if diesel prices are $6, $7. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's going to affect you personally. It's going to affect everything you touch. It's going to affect your energy prices as well, and the energy to produce everything as well. And this comes as National Grid, one of the biggest energy companies in the UK, also warned that there could be blackouts this winter if gas power plants are not able to keep running due to the energy crisis. So they're preparing for big things, guys. They want to quote rota disconnection plan your energy, all right? So just rotating disconnection, rotating blackouts, rolling blackouts to different sectors. They want to have complete control. This is like some Hunger Games stuff getting to. It's like, oh, this district, we turn the lights off. This district, turn the lights off. You know what I mean? Are the government buildings going to have their lights turned off? I wonder if all the government buildings in these districts will have their lights turned off. I mean, it's interesting to see. Maybe they will, but I kind of doubt it, all right? So get prepared now, guys. Get a generator, get solar, all these things, all right? I was mentioning yesterday, Champion generator. They work great, right? I've had over 1,000 hours of mine. Just change the oil. Works great, all right? Look into solar too. You can build your own solar kits, right? You can build a little solar kit for an RV, for around $1,000, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000. Depends what your budget is. Depends how much power you need, and that could be something that could save your life, right? In these situations where they're just shutting off the power. This is insane. All right, this is getting scary, guys. But it's good to have both. Have solar and a gas generator, because it could be forecast. It could be overcast for days. It could be snowing for days. You know what I mean? Your solar might not produce enough energy that you need. So have both so you can charge up your batteries. You know what I mean? Have battery banks and have a gas generator and solar to keep these banks charged up. All right? So stay prepared, guys. Get ready. They are telling us, they are warning us, governments all across the world are getting ready, and you need to get ready too. It's kind of like they kind of have to tell us what they're doing to us too. Like they always tell us what they're doing to us, They tell us, and it's kind of like, if you don't get ready, if you just accept it, if you just go along with it, then this is from their perspective, they kind of feel like you kind of accepted it. They told you this program, they told you what's coming, and they kind of feel like if you didn't prepare, then it's kind of your fault. I'm not saying that. They are the ones engineering the collapse, but I feel like that's how they justify it, getting away with all this stuff, all right? So thank you guys for watching. Get prepared, and you guys have a big old blessed day.